Hi, my name is Sage, and this week I wanted to make a clay bunny, but I also wanted to add some antlers, so kind of like a clay jackalope, and I also wanted to add a bunch of little red berries everywhere. And so, to get started, I'm going to need a wooden base and some tin foil. I then scrunch it up into somewhat of a rubber duck shape before then adding another layer of tin foil to bulk it up. Next, I add a layer of clay over top of it to build up the base of the jackalope. I then poke eye sockets in for the first time. The eyes will constantly look different throughout the video. I couldn't decide on how I wanted them to look, so if you see them looking weird or different, that's why. I'm just indecisive. Next, I add on the first set of ears. I change them a lot later as well because I'm indecisive. Basically, everything on the jackalope's head changes multiple times because I just can't make a decision because I'm a Libra and that's just who I am. Then I start by making her front paw, and I take a small piece of clay, smush it on the bottom before then moving to her hind leg. And to do that, I take a flattened piece of clay, smooth it to the body. I then add a small piece for her back paw. Next, I repeat these steps on the other side. And now that she has all four legs, I then use my stylus and start to smooth out the rest of her body. And this is one of the many times I tried to add eyes to the jackalope. At one point, I was gonna make her a cyclops because I just couldn't get them right, but I wanted to show the process of me doing it. And this is the first attempt that I make of trying to make her antlers. I cut some thin wire and then I poke them in her head. My first mistake was using the thin wire because it in fact did not hold up the clay the way that I was expecting it to. It worked fine for the first little bit, and even like right here, like it looks decent, but I just didn't trust that it wasn't gonna fall out of her head. So I just take them out. And so then I add in some thicker wire for the base of the antlers and I felt a whole lot better. But since I already covered the thin layer of wire with some clay, I decided just to wrap them around the thicker wire, and now they kind of even look more like antlers, so it all worked out in the end. And next, I just cover the wire with some clay, and I do that on both sides. Next, I use my ball stylus to make grooves all over the antlers to give them some texture. I do end up having to do this all over again later though, because I thought adding to the antlers was a good idea. Foreshadowing, it's not. And this is me taking out her eyes before then completely deciding to just change her entire face. Once I start building everything up once again, it honestly starts to look very similar to my last face, but in my mind, this one has more potential, so it works out. And sometimes to get where you're going, you just need to start anew. And then I decide, you know what this jackalope needs? A bigger brain. So I add on some clay to the back of her head. And this is where I change her ears. I rip them off and then I add a little bit more clay to them off screen before then putting them back on further back on her head. So they're now behind her antlers. And this is me poking in some eye sockets with my stylus. I poke them in from the sides because rabbits' eyes are supposed to be on the sides of their head, but this woodland creature said she wanted them on the front. And who am I to judge? This is the jackalope's world, and we're all just living in it. I then poke in her nose with my pointy stylus off camera. And you thought I was done with the eyes? Not yet. Yeah, that eye just kept on making problems for me, but you know what? That's okay. It's part of the artist's journey to take different paths. And this week, the path was the way of the eye. And this is me adding on to the antlers because I have the too much gene and I wanted to do, guess what? Too much, yes. I then move on to making little toesies for the little jackalope. I just take my pointy stylus and just stab them in. And then since the too much gene had a grip on me, I then go back and fix it by getting rid of the antler bases I put in and adding all the grooves back because that was just too much. And now the jackalope is completely done and ready to be baked. And now she's baked and ready to be painted. But first, I'm gonna paint the wooden base because I'm gonna let that dry while I do other things. And the other things include painting the first layer of the jackalope's fur brown. And then I do a first layer of the antlers kind of like a reddish brown hue, before then doing 3 layers of each color until she looks like this. And now that her fur and antlers are all painted, I then move on to painting her eyes. And I decide to go with black, and then once I put the first layer on, I then do another 2 layers until she looks like this. Next, I paint her nose holes, and I decide to go with the color pink. And once I do the first layer, I then do another 2 layers off screen as well. And once her nose is all done, I then go in and just do some touch-ups, just going around just where any place needs it. Next, I glue some fake moss to my wooden base. Then I get some fake berries from this berry string thing that I got from the dollar store. I then wrap the berries around the jackalope's antlers just because I think it's fun. And once I'm happy with the amount of berries I put on her antlers, I move on to hot gluing some berry sprigs. And I hot glue them all over the mossy area to kind of give it a forest feel. And once I'm happy with how they look, I then move on to adding some green sprigs, and then after that I also add in some berries onto the mossy floor. And once everything is adhered, that's pretty much it. So I would just like to say thank you so much for watching, and now it's time for the glamour shots.